That night, Emika confronted Alucci. Voices rose. She denied it at first. Then, when he showed her the messages, she grew defensive. So what if I talk to someone else? Am I your prisoner? I'm young. I have needs. Emika's anger boiled over. Get out. What? I said leave. Out of my house. Tonight. She tried to argue, to scream, to curse. But Emika had made up his mind. By morning, Alucci was gone. No one saw where she went, only that she left in disgrace. Her once proud steps reduced to hurried, embarrassed ones. Azuka remained in her room that morning. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. But later that afternoon, Emika stood at her doorway. He didn't knock. He simply stood there, eyes heavy. I was wrong, he said. I let the devil walk into our home. I let her turn me against you. Azuka said nothing. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But if you ever find it in your heart, please, come back to me. She turned to look at him. This was the man she married, not perfect but once kind, once hers. Her voice came out soft but strong. Forgiveness is easy, she said. Trust will take time. That evening, for the first time in almost a year, they sat on the veranda together. No food, no noise, just silence and a shared cup of palm wine. The stars blinked quietly above, as if the heavens too had been waiting for this moment. And maybe, just maybe, the healing had begun. The morning after Alucci's departure, the compound was eerily quiet. The kind of silence that felt like a new beginning, but also a reminder of all the chaos that had come before. Birds chirped gently in the trees, and the scent of dew-drenched hibiscus hung in the air. It was the first time in months that Azuka woke up without the weight of dread in her chest. But peace, as she was learning, came in waves, not all at once. Emika had risen early. He sat alone at the edge of the veranda, sipping a cup of black coffee. It was bitter, just the way Azuka used to make it for him in their early years of marriage. Today he made it himself. Not because Azuka had refused, but because he felt he didn't deserve the grace of her service, not yet. The house was quiet now. No loud music from Alucci's phone, no pungent perfume trailing through the hallways, no eyes rolling at Azuka's every word. And yet the silence brought something else too, a haunting kind of loneliness. The kind that makes you confront yourself. Azuka emerged a little after sunrise, tying her faded green wrapper around her waist, her face bare. No makeup, no earrings, just the tired beauty of a woman who had seen too much but still stood tall. Their eyes met. Emeka rose but said nothing. She walked past him gently and made her way to the garden at the back, where she had once grown tomatoes, bitterleaf and scent leaves before the chaos had crept in. The garden was overgrown now, much like their marriage, but she picked up the hoe and started to clear the weeds anyway. For the first time in a long time, Emeka watched her. Really watched her. The curve of her back as she bent over the soil, the precision with which she uprooted weeds and separated them from the crops. She worked with the kind of grace that made him feel both pride and shame. Pride that she was his wife, shame that he had forgotten who she truly was. He walked up to her slowly, unsure of what to say. "Let me help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Azuka paused, not looking at up. Then after a beat, she handed him a smaller hoe, without a word. Side by side, they began to till the land. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was healing. By noon, they had cleared half of the garden. Emeka wiped the sweat from his brow and looked over at Azuka. "You were right, Azuka," he said. "I failed you. I failed us." She didn't respond immediately. She dug her hoe into the soil once more and then finally turned to him. "You failed yourself more. You let the noise of shame and whispers make you forget who we were. What we built." Her words were calm, but struck him like thunder. He sat down on an old wooden stool nearby, his eyes moist. I thought a child would fix everything. That it would make people stop talking. That it would make me feel like a man again." Azuka put down her hoe and sat beside him. "You think I never felt shame? That it didn't break me every time a neighbor asked when our child would visit? That I didn't cry when your mother called me barren?" He looked away, blinking fast. But I stayed, she said. I stayed because I loved you, because I believed in us. And when I couldn't take the whispers anymore, I gave you the only solution I thought would help, even if it hurt me. Emeka turned to her. And I threw it back in your face. I let that girl. Her name doesn't matter anymore. Azuka cut in. What matters now is what we do with the time we have left. Her voice cracked slightly, but she composed herself. Do you still want this marriage, Emeka? Not out of guilt, not out of habit, but because somewhere in your heart you still see me. He took her hand, rough, calloused, familiar. I never stopped seeing you, Azuka. I just got blinded by shame, by selfishness, by fear. The weeks that followed were quiet but transformative. They began to eat meals together again. Emeka stopped waiting for Azuka to cook. He joined her in the kitchen. He listened more, talked less, and slowly they found their rhythm again. Azuka returned to her old routines. Her morning prayers, her gardening, her afternoon visits to the local women's fellowship. But something had shifted. The women welcomed her with open arms now, and the pity had faded. In its place was respect, admiration for the woman who had faced betrayal and still held her head high. Even the village kids who once mocked her silence now ran up to her compound to play. She started teaching them how to read, how to plant yams, how to make ogbono soup. Mama Azuka, they called her. It was not the title of a mother by blood, but it was the title of a mother by heart. One morning, while they sat watching the sky turn pink, Emeka turned to her. Do you think we could still adopt a child? Someone who needs love like we do? Azuka looked at him surprised. You would do that? I want to, not to silence the village, but to fill this home with laughter again. She nodded slowly, the idea settling into her heart like rain on dry soil. Then let's do it, not because we are lacking, but because we have more to give. And so they began the process. The local social worker introduced them to a young boy named Chibuka, 8 years old, with bright eyes and a love for books. He had lost his parents in a car crash and had been living with a distant relative who barely fed him. When Azuka first met him, he looked up at her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Are you going to beat me too? He asked quietly. Her heart broke. She knelt down, cupped his face. No, my child, here you will only know love. And he believed her. Within weeks, Chibuike moved in. The house that had once echoed with silence now pulsed with life. He called Emeka Papa and Azuka Mama by the second week. He helped in the garden, read aloud from Azuka's old schoolbooks, and followed Emeka everywhere, mimicking his every move. At night, they would sit around the small fire, and Chibuike would beg Azuka for one more story. She would smile and say, all right, but only if you promise to wash your hands before bed. And he always did. Months passed. The scars remained, but they faded, slowly. Azuka and Emeka no longer cared what the village said. They had built something stronger than gossip. They had built a second chance. One Sunday afternoon, as they walked back from church, hand in hand, with Chibuike between them, Azuka looked up at Emeka. Thank you, she said. For what? For returning, for choosing us. Again. He squeezed her hand gently. I never stopped loving you, Azuka. I just forgot how to show it. And in that moment, as the sun warmed their backs and the wind whispered through the trees, they knew that even broken things could be made beautiful again. Because love, when it is real, always finds its way home. The village market was bustling with activity on a humid Thursday morning. Women balanced baskets of yams and vegetables on their heads. Traders shouted out their prices, and children darted between stalls chasing each other. Azuka held Chibuike's small hand firmly as they walked between the rows of vibrant stalls, picking out fresh okra and peppers. Chibuike, now a confident boy with a wide smile and curious eyes, had adapted quickly to life with Azuka and Emeka. His presence had transformed their home. Laughter once foreign had become a daily melody. But as the weeks turned into months, shadows of the past occasionally crept in, whispering through cracks left behind by betrayal. Azuka tried not to notice the stares that sometimes followed her in the market. The same women who had once whispered about her barrenness now regarded her with curious eyes, some with respect, others with suspicion. "So she finally got a child," one woman murmured, just loud enough for Azuka to hear, "but not of her womb." Azuka smiled softly and tightened her grip on Chibuke's hand. The woman's voice faded behind her. When they returned home, Emeka was already waiting at the gate, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. He looked anxious. "What's that?" Azuka asked. "A letter," he said, "from Oluchi." Azuka's heart skipped. She didn't reach for the letter. "She wants to come back," Emeka continued. Azuka raised her eyebrows. "Come back? Here?" He nodded. "She says she has no one else. That she's sorry. That she's suffering." A heavy silence fell between them. Azuka turned to Chibuke. "Go and put the vegetables in the kitchen, my son." When he disappeared into the house, she looked back at Emeka. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know," he said. "I feel guilty. Maybe we failed her too. Maybe she was too young, too lost. Maybe we threw her into adulthood too quickly." Azuka sighed. "I don't hate her, Emeka, but I don't trust her. And this house, our peace, it's fragile. I won't risk it." Emeka nodded slowly. "Then we agree. She stays away." But Oluchi had other plans. 3 days later, she arrived unannounced. Emeka was repairing the gate hinge, and Azuka was shelling egusi under the mango tree when a dusty bus pulled up at the compound. From it stepped Oluchi, thinner, worn, with eyes that held both arrogance and desperation. Azuka stood slowly, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "Good afternoon, Auntie Azuka," Oluchi said with a shaky smile. Azuka didn't reply. Emeka emerged from behind the gate, startled. "You said you wouldn't come." "I had nowhere else to go," Oluchi said, tears welling in her eyes. "You had choices, Oluchi. You just never liked the consequences of those choices," Azuka said evenly. Oluchi dropped to her knees. "Please, just for a few days. I'll sleep outside if I have to. I'm not here to cause problems." Chibuke peeked from behind the curtain inside, watching the scene unfold. Azuka looked at Emeka, then back at the girl who once tore their world apart. "You can stay. For one night." Oluchi nodded, grateful, tears flowing. That night was tense. Azuka watched Oluchi's every move. Chibuke stayed close to her side. Emeka barely spoke. Oluchi was no longer the vibrant, defiant girl who once manipulated her way through the household. She was quieter, but Azuka was not fooled. Pain could humble a person, but it didn't always change them. Over dinner, Oluchi barely touched her food. "Are you sick?" Emeka asked. "I'm pregnant," she said suddenly. The room fell into stunned silence. Azuka's heart skipped. "Again?" "Whose child?" Emeka asked. "I don't know," Oluchi said softly. "It was a bad time. I lived with a man in Benin who beat me. I ran. Then another in Asaba. I thought he loved me. But he left too." Azuka stood abruptly, gathering the plates. Later that night, as Emeka sat on the edge of the bed, Azuka entered the room and leaned against the doorway. "Are you going to ask me to take her in again?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, not this time." "Good," she said, "because I won't." They sat in silence for a while. "I pity her," Emeka whispered. "I do too," Azuka replied, "but pity is not enough to build a home." The next morning, Azuka gave Oluchi money and food. "You have to leave," she said gently. "Find a place where you can heal, but not here." Oluchi nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant to ruin your life," she whispered. "You didn't ruin it. You just reminded me how strong I am," Azuka said. And with that, Oluchi left. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, just a note in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for showing me grace when I deserved none. I'm trying to be better. I hope I will be." Azuka folded the letter and placed it in a small box beside her bed. Life moved on. Chibuke turned 9 and asked to start school in the city. Emika and Azuka supported him. They traveled with him, helped him settle, then returned to their peaceful home. Their love, once bruised, had become stronger. Not perfect, but resilient. And though shadows from the past still flickered sometimes, they never stayed long. Because in the end, love had the final word.